Hey everyone, it's Lynn. We're gonna just give it another minute for everyone to find the hangout. But in the meantime, welcome to those of you who are here. If you want to send me a quick chat message, I would love to say hi. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. I'm looking forward to talking with you about short stories, specifically thinking about how you can fit short stories into your writing career. And then we'll have a question and answer at the end. So if you have questions, please, if you wouldn't mind holding on to them until we get to the end. And then I will stay on as long as I need to give you guys the answers that you're looking for. So first of all, I want to just start with what is a short story? A short story, this is changing a little bit because of ebooks. It used to be, in just strictly in terms of print restrictions, that a short story was usually between 2,000 and maybe 15,000 words. People would also publish flash fiction, which is usually under 2,000. A novella would be somewhere between 15,000 and 50,000. And then, of course, a novel would be 50,000 words or more. And if you see like the short novels that were published like in the 60s and 70s, like the really slim ones, those were about 50,000 words. And at the time they were considered novels. Today we would actually consider them to be like not quite a novel, just like mostly a novella. And that's changing because of ebooks. Readers don't really care how long the story is as long as it's satisfying. And publishers, when you don't have to worry about the cost of hitting certain page lengths, because there's like a there's an expense thing, like between 80,000 and 100,000 words is the sweet spot in terms of getting a novel printed and having the maximum savings in terms of what you're paying the printer versus what you can charge for it. Readers don't care about that so much anymore. So these definitions are traditional, but they're kind of sort of getting fuzzier. So I would say if you're writing a short story and it's anything under 15 or 20,000 words, it could still be a short story. Now, if you are trying to get published somewhere in print, they are still going to look at these word counts and probably try and hold you to that. But just so you know, that's sort of where the definition of what a short story is, where it comes from. But mostly tonight, I want to talk to you about what you can do with short stories. You can do a lot of things with short stories, and especially now that the internet has opened up so many opportunities. You can self-publish them and charge money for them. You can submit them to contests and anthologies and magazines and get paid or win awards. You can collect them in anthologies yourself. You can charge money. You can put out a collection of your own short stories. You can get together with friends and put together a collection, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. You can give them out as free samples. They can be something you give out temporarily as an exclusive offer. They can be something you publish perma-free on Amazon. You can give them away on your blog or Wattpad to attract traffic. You can give them away for the sake of list building, of course. And you can also use them as bonuses if you want people to feel like they're getting something extra when they buy a longer work. So first, let's talk about self-publishing your stories and getting paid for them. Amazon Short Reads lets you do this. And in terms of the length, I believe Amazon Short Reads is actually organizing the stories by how much time it takes to actually read them, which is a really new thing. That's something that people have never really done in traditional publishing before, but it's a great thing for readers who are like, I have 15 minutes at the bus stop. What am I going to read? And it's an opportunity for you too to possibly get your stories in front of people who might otherwise never would have seen them. So one of the things that you want to do, if you'll excuse me for a minute, I'm having a technical glitch here. Give me just a moment. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, one of the things you can do if you are self-publishing and paid, you can think about the strategy that you want to use with your short reads in terms of what kind of audience building you want to do. If you are somebody who's writing in a genre where readers are just really excited about ideas, for example, science fiction and fantasy, where readers will expect an author to write a whole bunch of different things, and the thing that kind of ties them together is not the content of the story. They don't have to be all space opera or urban fantasy or hard sci-fi, but readers do expect that each of those stories is going to delight them or give them a sense of wonder in some way. So perhaps you're writing in a genre where you don't need to have any relationship at all between your stories, and you just want to have whatever it is you feel called to write, and you can do that. You might also want to write interrelated stories, same world, same theme, or epigenetic. And I'm going to explain what that means. Same world means that you're writing different stories with different characters, but they're all set in the same universe, basically. They're all set in the future that you've created, or they're all set in a historical era in a city that you're really fascinated with. Same theme is a little different. It might be like they're all time travel stories, or maybe you tend to write stories about dysfunctional families. Maybe you're a literary writer. So the theme is the thing that makes your stories related, even though technically it's not necessarily the same characters pulling them together. Another way to make your stories interrelated is to make them epigenetic. And what that means is that you have a group of people who may be closely or loosely related, and you're writing stories about all of them. You might focus one story on each of the different people in the group, or you might have kind of group stories where you alternate which one of them is the main character, but they show up in each other's stories. Another thing you can do with Amazon short reads is serials and series, of course. And these are, if you are just doing short stories and publishing them to make money and nothing else, you want to seriously think about whether or not you can do this as a serial or a series. And the reason you want to think about that is because, of course, if you've got serials with cliffhangers, the reader starts the story and they have to buy all of them if they want to know how it ends. And of course, series is a way of pushing characters forward into different adventures. And again, that's something that if the readers love your characters, they're going to want to follow them. So serials and series are good career builders if you're doing short stories. And of course, they are in longer works too. But if you're only publishing short stories on Amazon, and that's how you want to make your money, seriously think about how you can do either serials or series. And I just want to say, if you're selling your short stories, please don't forget to put the info on your other work in the back matter. Don't just put cover images and blurbs. Put the first scenes of the other stories in your series, or put like an interview with one of the characters. Put a glimpse into the entire series. Give people a peek ahead in terms of how the series is going to unfold without spoilers, but just hinting at some cool things that are coming. Think about how you can use that back matter to really draw readers into not just that story, but into your body of work. And of course, don't forget your bio on your website. Mention the free story that you're giving away to anyone who joins your mailing list, because again, it only takes one person to find you through one of those short stories, and the next thing you know, you've got a fan who's going to buy everything else you write from here on out. Let's talk about submitting to contests, anthologies, magazines. This is about more getting the gatekeepers in the publishing industry to give you their stamp of approval, of course. And sometimes it's also about getting paid. There are pros and cons to getting published as a result of a contest, or published in an anthology that some editor's putting together, or published in a magazine. A lot of the pros, you've got the status of a traditionally published author. You can go to parties and tell people you're an author, and when they say, "Are you published?" you can hand them a copy of Asimov's magazine or wherever you were published, and they will believe you. Whereas, like, there's still a little bit of a stigma attached to self-publishing right now. That's changing a lot, but give it time. Eventually, they'll be considered the same thing. But for now, gives you a little bit more status. It builds your resume, and if you're querying agents and editors in traditional publishing houses for a novel, it gets you a lot more attention from the agent or editor if you have short story publications in your bio. So that's a very deliberate move. If you're trying to be a traditionally published or a hybrid novelist, that's something you really want to do. And of course, you don't have to have short stories to get their attention. It's just another way that you can make it more likely that you don't stay in the slush pile or don't stay there as long. Usually you also have the right to reprint your story. So it's kind of like a win-win. If you enter your story in a contest, often the contest will want first rights to print. Or the anthology. Sometimes anthologies take reprints. Magazines usually want to be the first, unless it's an amazing story or you're a really well-known author, then they'll be more interested in taking reprints a lot of the time. But they only take the right to publish it once, so it's still something that you could put out there. You could publish it once, wait 3 months after the magazine comes out, and then put it up in short reads and sell it that way too, or put it in your own anthology. You'll see people who write a lot of short stories, their stories tend to get reprinted multiple times because they can do it and it's a way to make money. And if you win a contest, of course, you can say to people, say to your grandma, say to your prospective agent, whoever, you can say that you're an award-winning author. And again, that's something that looks great on a query letter in your bio. The cons of doing this, of course, is that contests don't usually pay very much. Anthologies, it's not unusual to get paid somewhere between $25 and $50 to have your story published in an anthology. And the royalties for that anthology usually don't go to the authors. The smaller presses might set it up that way, but the big publishers, they pay you a flat fee, you get your $50, and then they collect the royalties on that anthology. And of course, they know that you're going to reprint the story in other places and make money in other ways, so they don't feel bad about that. Same with magazines. Magazines don't tend to pay a lot unless you happen to get in like the New Yorker. And if you do get in the New Yorker, please email me because I would love to congratulate you. That's awesome. But most of us who are writing short stories these days do not get published in the New Yorker. We get published in smaller magazines that pay less. And of course, the cons also, it's not on the slide here, but another con of going the traditional published way or getting published in a contest with a short story is that your chances of actually getting published are extremely low, or your chances of winning. Even if you're a good short story writer, all of these traditional venues for short stories are very, very competitive. And I've seen people who have written outstanding stories that they didn't have any problem getting published not win a contest because there were just so many other good authors and the judges had to choose. And of course, the judges choose by their personal taste too. So it's also a little bit of a crapshoot in terms of which judge you happen to get on the year that you're submitting. So those are some things to think about when you're submitting to contests, anthologies, and magazines in the traditional sense. And I wouldn't discourage you from doing it, but also I wouldn't count on it as a way to make a living. This is something that more builds your resume, gets you a little status, lets you call yourself an award-winning author. And otherwise, it just feels good. It feels good to have someone else say, yes, this was such a good story that I want to publish it. So now let's talk about collecting in your own anthologies, whether you're charging or whether you're distributing them free, maybe charging and giving the money to charity. These are great. You can do it yourself and collect your own short stories in one book. I would recommend sticking to one genre. Even better if the stories are related in some way so that they have a theme. It could be a content theme, or it can be just the kind of emotional experience. Like, for example, if they're all romance stories, so that the reader gets that experience of falling in love over and over again with each story. And these are also great for collecting serials or series. In terms of doing these with your friends, when you have a collection of short stories by multiple authors and you're self-publishing, it can get very complicated because only one person can get paid through Amazon, and then that one person has to distribute royalties according to whatever agreement that you and your friends have come up with. And I'm actually collaborating with someone right now, and I've been looking into it, and it's just the two of us, and we have a very clear understanding of how we're going to take care of everything, which is really important if you're going to do this. So personally, if I was going to collaborate, I wouldn't do it with more than one person. I would just I would just make it as simple as I possibly could. Or if I was going to do a collection of short stories with multiple people myself and self-publish it, or have one of us self-publish it, I would do it for a charity. I would say all proceeds go to this charity, and then everybody in the group can promote it. It's for a good cause. People will buy it to support the charity, and you all have an anthology that's being promoted and gets your name out there in front of readers. So that actually is a great way to get more readers and get your work out there, provided you're willing to not have the money and just do it for the sake of the good feeling that you're helping someone and that you're possibly getting in front of more readers. Okay, so let's talk about free samples. You can use them for a couple different ways, giving readers a taste of your writing and the emotional experience that they can expect if they buy your other work. And this is a really fantastic way to use them. Really, you want to think about what is the emotional experience that you deliver as an author, and give away a story that is representative and typical, and basically clues readers into the fact that if they just like this one story, they're going to like everything you've ever written, or at least most of it. Another thing you can use them for is to attract readers to a specific longer work or a group of longer works. If you've got a novel, if you can find a way to squeeze a story in between novels that is related to the progression from one novel to another, something that sort of bridges the gap, or if you can write a story about one of either your main characters that readers are going to want to know more about, or maybe a mysterious secondary character that it would be fun for readers to dig into. If it's in that same universe, chances are, if readers like it, they're going to go look for more stories in that universe by you. And you can do this in multiple ways. You can just make them perma-free on Amazon. And this is great if your story is intended to attract readers to a longer work, because that perma-free book is going to be listed probably on the same Amazon page as the one you want them to buy. You can do it as a limited offer to try and get people going. Say, I'm giving away this short story this month only. And if you buy the short story, if you download the short story this month and you like it, here's a coupon. You can go buy the longer work also for a lower price this month only. You can also, don't forget to put the information on your other work in the back matter of your free samples, of course, cover images and blurb, of course, but first scenes and chapters, interview with characters. If you have fan art from people who've been reading your stuff that's awesome and you think would intrigue readers, anything you can squeeze in there in that free sample, without making it so long that Amazon won't put it in short reads if you're trying to get it in the short reads program, of course. Get your bio in there and your website, mention a free story that you're giving away. Whatever you can do to use this, and think, how can this be an entryway for readers onto my list, into my world, towards my website, towards my Amazon listings. Okay, so looking at list building. This is very simply giving away a free short story in exchange for joining your email list. Any autoresponder software out there is going to allow you to do this really simply. You create an opt-in form for your website. You upload the PDF or zip file that contains the free story, and it gets automatically sent to anyone who signs up for your mailing list. And again, you want to put stuff in the back matter that's going to bring people from the free story into other things that you've written. And I know a lot of people have resistance to building a list, especially fiction writers, and I get that because for years I resisted it too. And we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Also, somebody emailed me off list before the webinar and said, I know I have to do list building, and I know I need to give away a free short story to get people interested in my fiction, but the technical side of it scares me. And because I am using a new webinar plugin with Google Hangouts, due to glitches with my last webinar. Hopefully this plugin is giving you a better experience, but also I'm not sure yet how to do a screen share from it without possibly disrupting things and ending the webinar early. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, later this week or early next week, I'm going to go into my autoresponder software, which is GetResponse. It's not necessarily the best one, but I'm using it because it's fairly simple and easy to use. And I will record a little video tour that shows you how to do this, how to create a squeeze page, how to put that opt-in form on your website if you don't want it on a squeeze page, how to upload your file and set up the autoresponder that automatically sends your story out. Just because I want you guys not to be afraid of the technology. It's simpler than you think. Before you've tried it, it seems impossible because you don't know how the software works. But as soon as you get into the software, they've set it up to be very intuitive and very, very simple. So I will get that video out to you guys next week. And that way, if you're feeling afraid, once you've watched the video, you can email me and ask me questions, and I'll try and help you out with whatever you need or point you towards a technical video that will basically walk you through the process in more detail. Okay, so using short stories as a bonus for buying a longer work. This is also a great thing to do. You do want to make sure that the longer works Amazon description lets readers know that they're getting a bonus short story with their novella. And you do want to think very carefully about what short story you include with your longer work. One way you can do it is just have it be a bonus story in that same universe. It could be even it could be a cross promotion. Like, for example, do you have two romance series that are designed to appeal to the same author, but are set in different locations? Like maybe one's in Victorian England and one's in America in the Victorian era. Readers are going to be interested in both of those. So what you could do is you could take your two novels or novellas, and you could put a short story from the other series in the back of the novel, so that people who are reading your English Victorian romance go, oh, she's also got an American Victorian, so I have to go buy that series now, and vice versa. Another way to include bonuses, use the short story to give them extra content that's related to the novel they just read, like a story that's set in one of your characters' youths, or that covers a significant event from the longer work, but do it from another character's point of view. If you're writing an urban fantasy and it's all written from your heroine's point of view, pick a cool section of the novel and write a short story that basically shows the love interest or the villain or whoever you think would be cool as a perspective for viewing that story in a very different direction. That could be a short story that you include. You can also do kind of a between the novels special episode, something that if you've published one novel and you know that the next novel is going to start a year later, maybe there's something in that year period that would yield a great short story and that would kind of whet people's appetite for the next novel. And of course, at the end of that short story, you could say novel 2, release date next May, and kind of get them primed to go and look for it on Amazon or put it on their calendars. Okay, so what kinds of short stories should you write? That depends a lot. It depends on the genre that you're writing in. It depends on what you're trying to promote with those short stories. It depends on what else you write. And it depends on how quickly you write. And by the way, I just want to give George a shout out. Thank you so much for asking this excellent question, George, because I wouldn't necessarily have thought to talk about strategy in quite this way if you hadn't asked. So the biggest advice I have for you when it comes to thinking about your short stories and what you should put out there when you're promoting is I always want you to think about your reader's experience. It's not just about I write military fiction, therefore I'm always going to put out military fiction, although that could be one of the threads that unifies your fiction. If that's all your readers want to read, you could go that way. But there's also a bunch of other things. If you are a more diverse writer and you are not sticking to just one subgenre, you could think about other things that unify your fiction. Chances are that unity is going to be a major draw for a large portion of your readers. For example, if you write stories of hope and redemption, where all of your characters, even though they might be in different times or different settings or different subgenres of a particular genre, but they all tend to focus on characters who are broken and have done something they regret, and they have to find a way to get over it. Chances are the people who are your hardcore fans, they're reading it because they love seeing people get redeemed. If your theme is the thing that unifies your fiction, make sure those stories that you are using to promote talk about characters who are getting redeemed. If your fiction has an emotional journey that the characters are looking for, like romance, it's falling in love, but different subgenres of romance, it gets more specific, falling in love with specific kinds of guys, falling in love when you have specific types of issues. Think about what that emotional journey is for your fiction. And a lot of romance writers will have taglines for that. Like I know someone whose tagline is sexy, snarky romance. So that lets all of her readers know that her characters are going to be a little bit mouthy and a little bit feisty, and also that it's hot romance. So there's going to be some sex in it. So if you have some sort of an emotional journey or a specific type of character or a specific tone that you always write in, think about that and think about how that continuity, how you can capitalize on that when you are writing a short story that you want to use to draw readers in. If you are writing mysteries, your point of unity might be an intellectual focus. Your readers probably like your mysteries because you are giving them interesting problems to solve. And I've heard mystery readers say over and over again, it's like, oh, I don't like his books because I know who it is by page 50, but I like these books because I never get it right. So if that's why your readers love you, make sure that that story offers them a very exciting puzzle to solve. If you're writing fiction that tends to be very philosophical, if you like to examine deep issues of the day in your fiction, make sure that short story has a deep issue in it and that you get at least a couple different facets of the issue into the short story so that it's representative. And again, of course, your story could have a worldview that unifies your body of work. There might be some message that you like your stories to put out, or there might be a worldview, like the worldview that the world is never black and white, but everything is relative. If that's something that typifies your story, that could be, if it typifies your body of work, that could be something you make sure that story focuses on. So the most important thing that you're probably getting by now is that you want to make sure this story is a gateway to your fiction. It needs to be representative of most of your work. And if you are writing in like 3 different genres, you're going to have to think about promoting with at least one short story for each of those 3 different genres. If you're writing mysteries and romance and science fiction, You are not going to pull all those readers in with one story, even if it's a mystery set in the future with a love interest for the hero. That's not going to be good enough. You want to make sure that that story is a gate. So let's talk about putting it all together. Let's say you have a novel coming out in 3 months or 6 months. Maybe you're good at planning ahead and you know when it's coming out. There are a number of things that you could do putting these things all together into a campaign. You could write a short story about the novel's protagonist during a period before that novel comes out so that readers get introduced to your protagonist. And of course, you want to include info and a first chapter for that longer book and use it to build a mailing list of potential buyers for the book. Because let's get real, anybody who loves a short story about that character is going to want to read a novel about that character. So those are going to be like your prime customers when that novel comes out. The people who are not only going to buy it first or pre-order it, but are probably going to tell their friends that they're excited that the novel's coming out because they loved your short story. You could also write a short story that's set in the same world as the novel, but featuring a different character, maybe a minor character, or maybe somebody who's not going to be in the novel at all, but still someone who's in that universe. Make it perma-free on Amazon, and that way you are introducing readers to that universe and getting them excited about your universe. So now you're tackling this from 2 different directions. One gateway story is focusing on protagonist. One gateway story is focusing on your world. So now you've got 2 ways for people to get into your novel before it comes out. You could also write a short story that gives the same reader experience. It doesn't even have to be in the novel's world, but it's something that's going to have the same emotional experience. Sell it through Amazon Short Reads. Somebody buys it because they like the idea of that story, and they say, wow, this author delivers fantastic touchy-feely endings that make me feel all warm and fuzzy. I love that. I'm going to go see what else they buy. So this is a third gateway, and it's focusing more on your style and your personality as a writer, the kinds of things you want to connect with your reader through. So that's your third gateway, is connecting through style and tone. You could also write a short story that happens between the first novel and the second novel. Release it not in the first novel at the end. Release it after the first novel, but before the second, sort of midway between. Include excerpts from both novels, because there will be people who find that short story and like it and say, oh, I missed the first novel. I better go buy it. It came out 3 months ago. And there will also be people who read the first novel and liked it. They will see the short story and it will remind them, oh yeah, the second one's coming out in 3 months. So this is basically a 4 short story campaign for a novel. And it basically gives readers 4 ways to get into your book. Okay, so here's another way that you could put this together. Let's say that you don't want to write novels. You don't even want to write novellas. You love writing short stories, and they might or might not be interrelated. So here's something you could do. You could start with a central story, one that features multiple people in the world that you're writing in and having them interacting. So this basically is like, hey, here's this group of people in this cool world in a short story. Make it perma-free and make sure it has, make sure, I'm sorry, that word both shouldn't be in the slide, but make sure that it gives people the flavor of the collection, of the whole set of short stories that you're writing set in this world. Second, so that'll be one gateway. It'll be like, hey, do you like reading stories about this kind of world? Well, here's a whole bunch more of them if you like this one. You could also write a story that write stories that focuses on each of the individual characters featured in the central story. Sell them through Amazon Short Reads. So if someone goes in and they like the free story that had 5 characters in it, and even if they didn't like all 5 of the characters, they only have to like one of those characters to go and see that you've got in Short Reads another short story about that character. And chances are, if they like the free one and then they like the story about the character that they enjoyed, chances are they're going to want to read more in that universe. You could also write a short bonus story in this world to give away as a list building tool, because we always want to be building our list, and we want to be building it with our target reader as closely as possible. You could also write a guide to the world you're writing in, which includes things like the world's history, bios of the characters, give teasers for the various stories without spoiling them, and give that away on your blog or website. You could also publish it perma-free on Amazon, but you want to have something on your website that is drawing people into the world. And also do it, try and do it in a way that doesn't like reveal everything, but has some teasers and maybe focuses on the hooks of the world, or the hooks related to the characters, to kind of intrigue people. I can tell you that I once read an entire series of science fiction stories that I had to track down through used bookstores, because there was a website I came across while researching my genre, and there was a guide to writing in that world. And basically this author had created a world, gotten published, couldn't get any more stories than published. She got the rights back, and she let a whole bunch of other authors write in her world, and then they started self-publishing collections of these stories. And that was what I came across, was the guidelines for doing that. But I was so intrigued by some of the elements in that list of submission guidelines that I was like, I have to find these books. This sounds really cool. So having something like that isn't necessarily fiction, but that has a lot of hooks in it that can get your readers interested, is another way to bring people into your stories. And also, if you're writing a collection of short stories that are in a particular world, or maybe they're not in a particular world, but they're related somehow, please publish them all in a box set. And then if you've got a collection, chances are it's going to be long enough for a print version. So publish a print version. One of the advantages that you can't do with just a short story that's on Kindle by itself, but if you have a collection of short stories, having a print version there and pricing it at $14.99 or $15.99 makes the much cheaper $6.99 box set look like a good deal to readers. So even if you never sell a print version, that can still help drive your Kindle sales. Also, have it made into an audiobook. You can do that for free through ACX. You'll basically be royalty sharing with your narrator, but it costs you nothing other than the amount of time it takes to work with your narrator to make the audiobook right, and however much time or whatever you spend making a cover for it. And again, having the audiobook up there not only widens your audience, which is something you can't do with individual stories, but you can do the collection. It also makes the box set look like more of a deal, because the box set's probably going to be cheaper than both. And also, I just want to say, I have books that I have sold on CreateSpace that I thought, who would ever spend the extra money to get a print version of this? This is something that obviously you'd want to just buy on Amazon and breeze through. But buy on Kindle and breeze through. I would never pay for a print version of this. I'd want it on my Kindle. And I've sold, I don't know how many copies of the print version. So that's another reason to put it up there, is you never know. So now let's talk about how you know you're doing the right things. Honestly, no one knows that they're doing the right things until they try. The publishing industry doesn't know, they're making educated guesses. Agents don't know, they're making educated guesses. If everybody knew in the publishing industry what was going to be a massive success, somebody would have snapped up Harry Potter the first time it was submitted, and J.K. Rowling would not have had 61 rejections before she finally got it published. And of course, e-publishing is making niche audiences available that would never have been big enough for a traditional publishing house to try and tap. But you have to test, and you want to look for ways to do small tests before you invest a lot of work. Now, you just saw me talk about how you could do a campaign for a novel. But if you have never written a short story before, and you're just thinking, I'll do these short stories and then I'll write a novel, that's a lot of work to invest before you've had a chance to test. And if writing a 5,000 word short story is a lot of work for you right now, you might need to just accept that where you are is not at the point where you want to start promoting with short stories. You might want to build up your skill level some, get to the point where you're writing a little faster. And there are lots of tools that can help you write faster and learn your craft, but there is no substitute for practice. The good news, though, is that short stories are much less risk than a novel. If you are a new writer, I strongly encourage you to experiment. If you want to write in 3 different genres, do it. Spend a couple weeks writing one short story in one genre, and then do for the other 2 and put them out there. Do a test. See which genre you happen to get more fans in. If you get people emailing you and saying, "Oh my God, I have never read a mystery this exciting. I loved it," that tells you that might be where your talent lies. So short stories are also a fantastic way to kind of do some testing and see what's a good career direction for you. So I'm going to open it up for questions in a minute, but I do have some questions that people emailed me in advance that I would like to go through and answer before we get started on the chat. So Patricia asks, the technical side of list building is intimidating, and I hate the idea of sending spam out to my list, and I don't know what to say to them. And I've already mentioned on the technical side, I'm going to get you guys a video next week that shows you it doesn't have to be painful to run a mailing list in terms of the technology. And I also want to say having a list doesn't necessarily mean you have to email every day. I know a lot of fiction authors who say they send out a newsletter once a month, and then maybe they send out a second one during that month if they have news. But fiction readers don't necessarily want to get an email from you every day. So if you are hesitating on list building because you're afraid you just won't have something to say every day, that's okay. You don't have to. Don't not do it because you think that you are going to have to devote an hour every day to writing your list. That's not the way it works. Now, you do want to write often enough that they are not confused and wondering who you are 6 months later when they haven't seen an email from you for 6 months, and they're like, have I read anything by her? I don't know. So you do probably want to keep it going at least once a month. But, again, it doesn't have to be a huge newsletter once a month. You could write a few paragraphs about the story you're working on now just to tell them what's coming up in the works. You could remind them that there's a coupon that if they go buy your novel at Smashwords next week, they're going to get it for 50% off. That could be your entire newsletter. So it can be small. It's okay to start small. You don't have to jump in and suddenly have this massive thing that looks like it was written in-house by a traditional publisher. Sometimes just like a short email is actually better because you're telling your readers what they want to know without inundating them with a whole bunch of other stuff to read. Now, George asked another question. He says, how do I build a relationship with the people on my list? That is an excellent question. And thank you again for asking that, George. And thank you also, Patricia. Great questions. A lot of the stuff you read online for marketing focuses on nonfiction. All the advice that you see from bloggers saying, oh, you have to build a relationship with your people. So make sure you do, a roundup of news in your industry for the week. And of course, that's not at all helpful for fiction writers. So I want to suggest that you think about, as you are getting ready to post your monthly newsletter, think about what you have in common with the people on your list. If you are writing mysteries where the main character is a knitter, maybe you want to send them a knitting tip every month. There's romances that are focused on cookbooks. Maybe you want to send them a recipe every month. If you're writing science fiction and it's set in the near future and it's really heavily focused on the space, the desire to get to Mars or the desire to colonize the solar system, maybe you occasionally want to just write a few paragraphs about what's going on with NASA and your reaction, how you feel about the fact that it's going to take us longer to get to Mars than we thought, and what you're excited about in terms of the things that are being done by Richard Branson and other people who are trying to use the private sector to get into space. So think about those topics. What do you have in common with the people on your list? If you are writing inspirational fiction, or religious fiction. Maybe you want to just send them a Bible verse and tell them what it means to you in your newsletter. Maybe that's something that could be like your little tiny article in your newsletter, just to keep people engaged and remind them that you're writing about stuff that they're interested in. Another question you can ask yourself, and this again is easier for nonfiction and fiction, but it can be done. Ask yourself how you can help the people on your list. And this is pretty tricky when it comes to fiction, but you never know. If you're writing some sort of content theme thing, are you writing military fiction? Maybe you want to donate some proceeds of one of your short stories to a military charity, something that helps wounded veterans, or sends care packages to people to enlisted people who are in Iraq and can't get basic supplies, or phone cards. I know that was a big drive for a while, and I think it still is. So think about what your readers do and what they care about. There may be something you can do to help them. Maybe not. Maybe that's not a relevant question for your target audience, but it's something to think about. You also want to think about what aspects of your personal life you might be willing to share with the people on your list. And by this, I don't mean like dark family secrets, but every once in a while, a personal note talking about something that you're going through, or a memory that you had that reminds you of a life lesson. Those kinds of stories can be very engaging. You never know who you're going to help, somebody who is going through the same thing that you're going through right now. So again, you don't have to. One of the easiest ways to build a relationship with the people on your list is to focus on what you have in common. But these other two questions, you might occasionally throw in something more personal for a while, or it just kind of depends on who you are and who your readers are and what you're comfortable with. One thing I do want to say, one of the biggest mistakes I see fiction writers making is that they blog about how to write. And that means they're not talking to their readers unless they're writing fiction about novelists. They're attracting other authors who they then network with. And while that's safe, it feels very safe to do that because you don't have to leave your comfort zone and you don't have to think about who your target reader is. But really, it's not the way to build a relationship with the people on your list. It's a way to build a relationship with people who are doing the same thing you're doing, and that's different. Okay, so we have another question from Alex. And he has also, I think, a couple of questions here. So many that we did 2 slides. Alex wants to know, how and where do I publish short stories? If you want to publish them and get paid, Amazon, Smashwords, Omnilit, All Romance ebooks if you're writing ebook, romance or erotica. There are probably other places. A lot of the other ones, like I think Google Play, a lot of people are starting to publish on Google Play right now. And I don't know if you can go through Smashwords for that or if you have to go to Google separately. Again, all the same places will allow you to publish for free, and then also Scribd will allow you to publish for free. I know some authors really hate Scribd because for a while they were promoting piracy, or they were doing things that made it easier for people to pirate books. I think they've changed. I don't personally have a grudge against Scribd for, maybe not being with the program initially. But some people do, that's fine. Wattpad is another place where you can publish stories for free and use those free stories as a gateway to your paid work. There are places where you can find magazine listings in terms of them explaining what the market is. You can find calls for anthologies. Here are 3 websites that will help you get started. And also, if you just Google where to publish short stories, you will find so many articles explaining to you how to find magazines, small presses, who are doing anthologies and who basically are putting out these calls for anthologies. And if you can write to a theme but also turn that theme to your genre, that can be another way to get your work out there and in front of people who might otherwise never find you. But also, you don't want to waste your entire writing session just focusing on trying to get published that way either. You want to spread it out. And I know some people believe that traditional publishing is better. Some people believe that indie publishing is better. I believe that you want to keep your options open, be a hybrid author, and you can focus on one or another. But as the publishing industry shifts, I think you should be prepared to shift. So that's my opinion there, for what it's worth. Alex also asks, how can I find fans for different genres, and what should my short stories be priced? And I'm just going to say, I don't think I can answer that question, how do I find fans for different genres, in really specific terms. It totally depends on who you're trying to reach and what you're willing to do. Do you have money for advertising? That can affect tremendously where you want to focus your promotion efforts or where you don't. How much money you have for advertising can affect what's worthwhile for you to do or not. If you have a $0 marketing budget, and I have been there, you can try genre-related blogs. You can try forums. You can try discussion groups. You can look on Goodreads. There's not only places to interact with other reviewers, but there's also groups focused on different genres there and subgenres, and even authors. You can find groups just talking about one author. There's deal sites that if your book is 99 cents or free, they're going to send, you can apply to be in one of their newsletters so that people who are looking for free or cheap books will find it. There's just so many ways that you can find readers. And I could teach a whole class on that and still not address all of them. Also, how extroverted you are is going to affect it. If you are very introverted, you probably don't want to do book signings in public. And you might not even want to do live chats. Because they can be very intimidating, and if you're hyperventilating, it's harder to connect with readers. So the best advice I can give you is that you really need to think about who's reading your book. If you are going and writing NASCAR romances, you probably want to figure out where NASCAR fans are hanging out. If you are writing horror, figure out who's going to see horror movies, and maybe you could blog about different horror movies that are coming out and what you thought of them and deconstruct them. Not for writers, but just talk about what was good about them, and that can be a way to attract fans of horror. So you're gonna have to put some thought into it and be creative, but it's possible. It's possible to find your fans if you're willing to spend some time looking. Also in the US, in terms of price, short stories seem to be doing pretty well at free and 99 cents. I've seen a lot of reviews of people complaining that they bought a short story at $2.99 and felt kind of ripped off by that, and I can relate to that. I wouldn't be happy to read a 10-page story and pay $2.99 for it unless it was amazing. So you probably want to keep them cheap. If you're outside the US, look at the Amazon site that serves your area of the world and see what the best-selling short stories in your genre are selling for. So that concludes the prepared portion of the presentation. I would love to know what your questions are. What do you want to talk about? What are you interested in? Did I say anything that confused you? Let me know. And I just want to say hi to everyone. Dave, I am so sorry about the sound problems you're having. That might be your computer's hookup with Google Hangouts. I apologize. I don't have any control over the sound from here. I'm using a professional microphone. And as far as I can hear what's coming through the microphone into my computer, it sounds good. So all I can do is apologize. And I hope that the replay works for you. Hi, Michael. Hi, Linda. Hey, George. Nice to see you. And Chuck asked a question. Didn't know you could make stories perma-free on Kindle. How? Amazon is funny in that if you are self-publishing, they don't let you just set the story for free. But they're also very aggressive about matching prices. So the way that you make a story perma-free is you set it at 99 cents on Amazon, and then you go and you publish it somewhere else. And that could just be as simple as giving it away on your website. Thanks for the feedback, Michael. He said it sounded good. So fingers crossed that everything is good for the rest of you guys. But anyway, so you give the story away somewhere for free, and then you go back to your book page, Chuck, where there will be a link somewhere on that Amazon description page. And there's a link for saying, do you see a better price for this book? Let us know. Click the link and let them know that the story is being given away for free. And also you can email Amazon's KDP help desk and say, oh, by the way, I'm charging 99 cents for this story here, but I'm giving it away for free on Scribd. And they can be fussy about it. It's totally up to their discretion. But the majority of the time, because they want to be the low price leader in ebooks, most of the time when they find out that you're giving it away on Scribd or somewhere else, they reduce the price to free, and they keep it there until they find out specifically from you that you've raised it everywhere else again. So Chuck, that's how you do it. It's a little bit annoying how roundabout you have to be with Kindle, but that's the way they've got it set up. So that's how you do it. Melanie, thanks for stopping by. She asked the question, if you're writing into different pen names, do you create an author profile for each one? I do. I don't know what Amazon's official policy is on it. I have a different account under a different email address for one of my pen names, specifically because I want to have my listing in Author Central. But do not take my word for it that this is the way Amazon prefers to do it. Go into KDP, go to their help, and tell them you've got 2 pen names, you want 2 different things in Amazon Central, and ask them how they want you to handle it. And I should probably take my own advice and do that too. So thanks for asking, Melanie. Are there any other questions you can think of? Or any comments? Anyone want to share what their experience has been with publishing short stories so far? Oh, you're welcome, Chuck. Oh, I do want to say one other thing on pricing. Where that 99 cents for a short story might not apply is erotica. You want to research your genre and subgenre of erotica. There are publishers that do very well pricing short stories at $2.99, and that's because they're appealing to a very targeted niche audience that will pay more money for a very specific kind of story that they want to read. So do you guys have any other questions you want me to answer before we go? Oh, Linda has a question. Hi, Linda. With a series, how many short stories should I have ready, and should I release them a week apart? I think that kind of depends on how many short stories your series can support. I think it's a good idea to have at least 3, just because readers are kind of trained to think in terms of trilogies. And also, if it's just 2 stories, it doesn't feel so much like a series. It feels kind of like you wrote 2 stories. So I would say at least 3, but I don't think that there's like a set number. If you have a universe and characters that can support a dozen short stories that are all very tightly interrelated, publish all 12 of them. Go for it. Or you could break it into 2 series if there's some sort of obvious way to split them and have 2 series of 6. That's cool. But I would go with like the demands of the story. And releasing them a week apart is great. If you're publishing something with cliffhangers, yes, publish them, have them come out boom, 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 boom. I've seen people who have had cliffhanger endings that were like really intense in story 1 and 2, and then they waited 3 weeks between stories to publish, and you wouldn't believe the number of pissed off emails they got. So if you're writing something where the reader doesn't get the whole story and they have to keep going to continue, you do want to space them closer together. And also make sure you let the readers know at the end of the book, part 2 coming on this date, part 3 coming on this date. So they have that reassurance that they didn't buy one story and that you're not just going to drop them without ever finishing it. If the stories are not cliffhangers and they're not really something where the reader is necessarily going to feel urgent, they have a sense of resolution at the end, you could publish them farther apart. And you might want to play with it in terms of trying different time periods to see, because in different genres, people read faster. Romance readers might read like 4 or 5 books a week and multiple short stories. They read voraciously. In science fiction, someone might read like 1 book and take 2 weeks to do it. Or maybe like read 2 or 3 short stories over that period of a couple of weeks. So testing your target reader and seeing what they respond to is also good. Hi, Michael. Michael says, while I'm still editing the first novella, the short story idea wants to turn into another novella. Should I resist the urge to do so? I imagine it's pretty common for a flurry of new ideas to come while writing and editing. And that is a great question, Michael. And I had that problem for a really long time. In fact, mine didn't just turn into novellas, they turned into novels. I think you want to look at the conflicts that you set up for the short story. If you set up a conflict that is too big to be resolved in a short story, and you can email me if you want to talk it over, send me a summary of what your conflict is and what you've got so far in the short story in terms of what happens. We can talk about it. If your conflict is too big, the story tends to go longer because it's just really hard to resolve it in time for it to be a short story. If you are at an experimental stage and you don't have readers expecting you to release at a certain time and you don't have a contract deadline, I would say experiment with it. If you look at this short story and you look at what needs to happen to make it satisfying, and that makes it 20,000 words, go ahead and write 20,000 words because you don't have any pressure on you to publish by a certain date. And experimenting while you're getting into a genre or getting into a new art form, you learn so much. You learn so much about what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. So again, like I said, you can email me. I would love to talk with you about it and try and help you figure out if it really is a short story idea or if it's really a novella idea. But you don't have to confine that if that's not what you set up. And it's always better to go with the needs of the story over the needs of your publication schedule. So how are we doing? Anybody else got a question? Or a problem? You're welcome, Michael. And if you don't have my email address, it's Kaizen, KAIZENLYNN @gmail.com. While we're waiting to see if another question is going to come in, I just want to let you guys know, some of you may or may not have bought Larissa's short story class where she had a class on promoting with short stories, and there were apparently some terrible technical difficulties due to a storm they were having. And if you haven't heard from her, I just heard from her today, actually. She emailed to say that something happened with her health-wise, and she went from the storm that crashed everything straight into the hospital and has been there this whole time. So that's why you haven't heard from her. She emailed me today to say that she was back on her feet and was working on getting the replay going. So if you bought it, just want to let you know it hasn't been forgotten. It's coming. She just needs a little more time, I guess, to recover. Hey, Elena, thanks for stopping by. I'm really glad you enjoyed the webinar. It's nice to see you. Hey, Carol, how you doing? What Carol asks, what is a good length for a short story? It kind of depends on your goal, for one. If you're trying to just squeeze in, if you're trying to basically just attract readers to a longer series, and you just want to give them a flavor of the universe and or an introduction to a really cool character, you could write something short. 5,000 words would be fine. Like I said earlier, in traditional publishing, up to 15,000 words. And in some cases in sci-fi and fantasy, because the world building is so intense, traditional publishers would occasionally even take 20,000 words as a short story. But it really depends on the story you're trying to tell. If you like to tell really complex stories, or stories that have multiple characters in them, it's really hard to write a multiple point of view short story. Short stories usually have one character as the POV character. But again, with e-publishing, you can kind of play with that. So if you want to write a short story that introduces the three main characters of your novel, or the three main characters of three different novels, go ahead and do that, because on Kindle, it doesn't matter how long it is. It only matters to you, the writer, who has to do the work. You will find probably that genre dictates what your readers expect a story to be. Horror readers will take really short stories as long as they have the scare in them and that twist ending that horror readers expect. Romance readers tend not to like short stories so much, because a lot of romance is the buildup that leads to the characters getting together, as opposed to just that moment where the characters get together. If you are writing romance, I would say don't write one under 10,000 words, because you are not going to have nearly as much positive reader response to something that's like 3,000 words that purports to be a romance. And yes, I have written a 3,000 word romance story. It was not well received. So it kind of depends on your genre. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish with the story. If you are trying to introduce, like I said, three characters from three novels, you probably need a little more time than 5,000 words to do a good job of that. And the most important consideration here with short stories, because they're so short and people are paying for them, they expect them to be good. So if you have to choose between putting a little extra work in or extending it longer than a short story normally is, but that allows you to do a good job, always go for doing a good job. Short stories, readers kind of eat them like candy almost, because you can squeeze them into your day, and whereas like they're more patient with a novel, because in a novel they expect the story to take some time to develop, and people will stick with a novel that's slow if they believe that it's going to pay off in the end or get better in the end. Whereas with a short story, if it's not entertaining them all the way through, they are very likely to just put it down and say, okay, this was not good. Okay, Melanie has a question. Do you know a good software program for formatting your stories? I have a couple of stories I'm trying to publish, but having some trouble trying to figure out how to format them. I'm assuming that you mean formatting them for Amazon Kindle as opposed to formatting them for submitting to a traditional market. I just do mine in Word, and I use the Smashwords guide to formatting, because it's very simple. And when you format for Smashwords, you have to make very few tweaks once you look at what your story is going to look like in Kindle. Smashwords did a good job of like laying down very simply how you format the ebook, and Kindle most of the time picks it up without me having to make any changes at all. So I can't recommend from that perspective. I have heard that Vellum for Mac users, I know people who love Vellum. If you're trying to publish it, format it as an ebook, I know people who love Scrivener, for using that to format it for an ebook. I don't have. Okay, well, I do have one more thing that I've heard people say is really good. It's Jutoh, Jutoh. Like I said, I've never used it. I know that people also use a program called Calibre, and again, I have never used it. So I don't know how easy it is to learn, but those are the four things that I've heard people say that they love using to format their fiction into ebooks. so that they can upload them either directly or upload them to a converter like Smashwords or Kindle uses. And I apologize that I don't have any better suggestions, Melanie, other than to say check out these things I've heard are good. But I will look into it. I'll ask around on some of the mailing lists I'm on, and I will send you an email next week and let you know what I found out. Michael, good job on going out and reading the competition, doing your market research. Michael says that he's been buying a few free and 99-cent ebooks to get a feel for things. And that is exactly what you want to do. As soon as you know who your target reader is and what books they buy, go buy half a dozen of them and read them. And especially with short stories, they're cheap and they're short. In an afternoon, you could get a feeling for what your market is and what people are expecting from you. And Chuck chimed in and he says Scrivener or a program called UEC are both good for many ebook formats. Thank you so much, Chuck. I've never heard of UEC, but I'll look into that too. Rick says, have you ever taken a romance, then outsourced it to create an erotic version? No, Rick, I always write my own sex scenes, but thank you for asking. You totally could do that. You could outsource it. A lot of the people who are outsourcers on Odesk and Elance, which apparently have now merged to become Upwork, a lot of them say they write erotica and romance, but they write erotica. And the tone of their erotic scenes is graphic and crude in a way that romance readers do not expect. There are a whole bunch of people right now who are outsourcing romance, they think, and are disappointed by the reviews that they're getting on Amazon because they told their reader that they were publishing romance, and what they really published was an erotica story. And if you don't read in the genre of romance, you don't know the difference. And neither do the outsourcers who have made a living writing erotica, but are saying that they write romance because it gets them more customers on the freelancing sites. So I would be cautious if you're going to do that. And there's no reason why you couldn't. Absolutely. Give the outsourcer the romance that you've written. Tell them what you want to be in the erotic version. But when you get it back, find a best-selling romance author who writes hot stories like Cynthia Eden, perhaps, in Paranormal. And I can't think of a lot off the top of my head right now, but I'd be happy to make you a recommended reading list, Rick. And take one of those best-selling authors who writes erotic romance and compare the language, because your erotica writer will have used language and euphemisms that a romance writer wouldn't, and that romance readers won't like. So you can go through and look at all the differences in how they describe genitalia and bodies and the act of having sex and compare, and you will see a language difference. And then you can fix the sex scene that your outsourcer wrote by changing the language a little bit. So that's how I would do it if I was going to outsource it. I hope that's helpful. You're welcome, Melanie. So anybody else have a question before we go? And I'm making a note to myself, Melanie, that I'm going to look at ebook formatting software, and I'm going to ask around, and then I am going to email you. And if you guys want me to email the whole list, I'll be happy to send out an email. And if it's only Melanie that's interested, I can just email Melanie. So you guys just let me know if you need it, the information or not. So how is everybody doing? Are you guys all working on short stories? Or are you interested in writing short stories but maybe haven't done one yet? You're welcome, Rick. And if you're interested in writing short stories and have not taken Damien's class, which I'm still in the beginning stages of, but I'm enjoying it a lot, I would recommend a book Let me see if I have it handy here. I believe it is by Jack Bickham. Give me a sec here. I'm actually going to look it up because it's one of the best books on short stories I have ever read. Okay, it is by Jack Bickham. It's called Writing the Short Story, a Hands-On Program. And it's awesome. He goes through all the elements of short stories, and then he leads you through the process of figuring out what your short story what should be in your short story. Hey, Rick says he's creating a serialized novella. Awesome. Are you going to publish it on your blog? Are you going to sell it as a series of Amazon shorts? Or are you going to publish, like, serialize the whole thing and then publish it later? I would love to know what you're going to do with that. Chuck says he's been a writer of books of 3 to 5 shorts, but he just finished a novella. Congratulations. I would be interested to know, did you publish any of the shorts separately, or are you just focusing on publishing short collections? Kelly says she's interested, but she hasn't done one yet, and she's considering shortening one she's writing. That's awesome, Kelly. If you want help with the shortening process, please feel free to send me an email. That can be a little bit tricky depending on how you set up your conflicts, but it sounds like a good idea, and you might already have a handle on it, which is awesome. George says he has the first draft of a short story for a series of short stories. Very cool. Congratulations, George. Melanie says that she has some that are outsourced for her, and then she's writing some of her own. Very cool. In terms of the outsourced ones, if you don't mind my asking, Melanie, did you create a complete plot for those outsourcers, or did you actually pay the outsourcers to create the plot for you? Hey, Rick. I'll look for you when I get into the forums in Damien's class. And Charles says he's published about 15 shorts under 2 erotica pen names 6 months ago, then lost momentum. Charles, is there anything I can do to help you figure out how to get your momentum back? Was it just life took over and you ran out of time? Or are you having any issues that maybe we could talk through in terms of figuring out where to go with the next stories? Rick says Amazon, very cool. And Rick's publishing on Amazon. Chuck says he published one of his stories separately and did the rest of collections. And Chuck, I would love to know, are you finding that the collections are more profitable than publishing the stories separately? Or is it just a matter of the collections felt like they went together and the one story felt like it should be separate? Kelly says, thanks, I need to send you my work anyway. Awesome, I look forward to reading it. And any of you who are taking the novella class, I know that technically we're over in terms of when we said the class was going to end, but I'm going to stay in the group. I'm going to be in the group indefinitely. If it takes you a while longer to finish your novella, or you still get stuck 3 months from now, please don't hesitate to email me. I'm going to be there, and I'll answer questions for as long as it takes. Melanie says for one of the series, the outsourcer created her complete plot, and for the other series, she created the plot. And I would actually be interested, Melanie, in what your perception was in terms of your outsourcer's ability to come up with a good plot. Were you really happy with that? Or I'd just like to know, just because I'm interested in what experience people are having with outsourcers. Charles, email me, okay? Because I actually have a lot of experience with life burnout and self-doubt. And I know that I probably can't do anything about whatever's burning you out, but if you want to talk about it, I could point you towards some resources that have really helped me when I was at a low point. I had a period in my life where my dad died, and then shortly after that, well, first I got a novel that got rejected a lot, and then almost immediately after that, my dad died, and then almost immediately after that, I discovered that I had uterine cancer. And the period right before that, I had just been working night and day, burning the candle at both ends, trying to get that novel published so that I could get all those rejections. And I went through a period where I couldn't write fiction for about a year and a half. And I would be happy to email you or talk with you privately about some things that kind of helped me pull out of that, because that is really tough. When you're in a situation where life has just got you so far out of the mindset where you need to be creative, it can be really tough to get back. And I'm very sorry that you're going through that right now. Chuck says his collections are doing better and they're mystery and science fiction. That's fascinating, guys. So I did not have that data when I gave this presentation, but if you are going to write short stories, what Chuck is saying, if you're writing in mystery and science fiction, you might do a test. Release a short story and then release a collection of short stories, 3 to 5, that are meant to go together, and see which does better, because Chuck is doing well with the collections. Very interesting, and thank you for sharing, Chuck. Okay, Carol says, I published 3 short stories separately and then in a collection, and the collection way outsells the separates. Okay, that is a second data point. And Carol, can you remind me again what genre you're writing in? And Melanie says that she was happy with the outcome of the plot for both series, and it was a bit of a challenge, but the outsourcers were willing to work with her to get a story she was happy with. That's great to hear. I'm excited to hear that you're having a good experience with your outsourcers. And I want to say that based on some things that other people have said, I think you might have done a really good job of selecting outsourcers. And I would love, actually, Melanie, if you don't mind, to talk with you later on in email about how you handled your outsourcers and what, if anything, you did to manage them. Because most of the people I know who have worked with outsourcers have not had good experiences. And I haven't done a lot of outsourcing, so I don't really have a lot of advice on how to find a good one or how to make sure that the one you're working with, that you manage them so that you get a good work out of them. Oh, and Carol, who was chiming in to say that her collections are doing way better than the separate stories being published, she's writing in inspirational religious fiction. So that's another data point. Think about, again, wanting to do the test. And Chuck says that he is going to further test his singles. So Chuck, I would love to hear what results you get. If you don't mind emailing me once you've put out a few more singles, it would be really great to hear how that goes. So is there anything that you guys want to talk about that is not related to short stories? And I know it's getting late. I apologize. We've been on for 90 minutes, and it's past dinner time. But please, if you have anything else you want to talk about before we go, please chime in. Oh, thank you, Chuck. I look forward to hearing from you on your split test. Melanie says she'd be happy to discuss process with outsourcers. Thank you so much, Melanie. I look forward, if you could drop me an email at kaizenlynn@gmail.com. And maybe we could even share, once you told me what you're doing, maybe we could share it with other people who are trying to work with outsourcers and maybe having problems. I would really love to hear what you're doing. Thank you. Oh, and thank you for your nice words, Elena. I really appreciate it. You're welcome, Melanie. I'm really enjoying hanging out with you guys, but I don't want to keep you from dinner. I know that it's getting late. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it, and I hope you found the presentation helpful. Please always feel free to email me anytime. Sometimes it takes me a day or two, but I answer emails when I get them. If you don't hear from me in 48 hours after writing me, either I had the flu or I didn't get your email. I didn't actually make it to me. So don't ever hesitate to nudge me if you're delayed in hearing from me, and always feel free to send me a message if you need help with something or if you have a question. Rick says he likes Webinar Fusion Pro. Thank you. I like it too. The last Google Hangout we did was horrible. I mean, it went okay in terms of like the content. We talked and it was great, but the technical glitches were crazy. And I'm so glad that it worked out tonight, because I've never used this software before either. So thank you guys for coming. Okay, cool. Carol, she's doing the novella class. She's going to write a third novella to make a collection and test out how they do as opposed to the short story collection. That's awesome. Please, Carol, keep me updated. I would love to hear how that works, the collections versus the singles with novellas, because I've never tested a novella collection either. I've always published them singly. So that would be cool. Thanks, George. I'm glad it was helpful. I want to thank you guys again all for coming. This has been great. Any last questions before we go? I'm not seeing anything come through, so I am going to bid you adieu. I hope you have a great night. You guys have my email address. You know how to get a hold of me. I love talking to you, so please don't hesitate to email me with other questions, or if you just want to talk. And I look forward to hearing from Chuck and Carol and Melanie about the things we talked about. And yay, Michael only got kicked out once tonight. Awesome. I'll definitely be using the software again. Okay, guys, I'm going to say goodnight. It's been great, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care, and happy writing.